Welcome to the London Commercial Offices podcast with me, your host, Steve Berridge, Managing Director at Fidgens Cost Management. This is a podcast where we share the stories, career paths, lessons and insights from some of the industry's most influential people. Anything contained within our podcast should not be considered professional advice, and if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe or follow buttons to ensure you don't miss any of the amazing guests we've got coming up. It also really helps us grow the show. Thanks. Today we're joined by Colin Becker, an equity partner at Metrus Real Estate Advisors. Metrus has been advising property owners and developers for over 40 years. Today we're going to dig into Colin's exceptionally long tenure at Metrus and find out what makes him tick. So, Colin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be here with you.
Pleasure.
Appreciate you asking me on.
Oh, no, my pleasure. As you'll know from our previous episodes, we like to start right back at the beginning, and that can vary. People go back as far as childhood, school, uni. I suppose the question that I'd like to ask is, were you always destined to end up in real estate?
I think so. I was very keen sportsman when I was younger. Some say reasonably talented. I was a fairly decent footballer and tennis player. The sports weren't quite what they are today in terms of what could be earned. Although I had a lot of natural talent, I think, I just took a natural path. I think it was destiny perhaps, because there's a long tradition of property and real estate in the family. So much so that my father has run a residential firm of real estate advisors, predominantly dealing with residential, whereas my expertise lies commercially. But going back to those adolescent teenage years, there was very much a thought process of, well, the natural path for me would be to go into business with my father. But he actually discouraged it hugely, which, fortunately I've never taken too personally. But he very much encouraged me to go into, as it was known then, the West End, and ply my trade, because he just, said to me at the end of the day, different clientele, and felt that there would be far greater opportunities doing that than being based slightly more locally, dealing with residential.
I can relate, because obviously my father's also a QS, and I can look back on my time and it wasn't really young. It was late teens, looking up, going, oh, look, seems to do all right for himself. Maybe I should do that. And I always thought at the time, I always wanted to go and do my own thing in terms of, the idea of being a QS. Yeah, I'm interested in that, but didn't want to necessarily jump straight into working with my father. It took a long time, and that has obviously come back around, as you know. But I can relate. So were you surrounded by the work that he was doing as you were growing up?
I was
work experience the odd day or so in the office?
Well, one of my earliest memories is back in the day they had residential agencies, and eventually they got bought out in, I think it was the late 80s, 90s. Excuse my inaccuracies there if I got it wrong, but I think building societies went through a period where they bought a number of independent estate agents, and at the time my father and his partner had built up a few offices regionally where we live. But one of my earliest memories was sitting in a car, and my father was the appointed agent on a new development that had been launched, and there were genuinely people lining the street to put their name down. I guess this day and age, you kind of almost liken it to a drop. Okay, when you hear Adidas are dropping a new pair of, or Nike or whatever, and it was just like, I thought, wow, this is incredible. This is like crazy. And I used to kind of pop into my dad's office occasionally, and I suppose there was something about real estate that's inherent in the blood. But I've spoken about my father a lot. I have to bring in at this point my mum, who has always taught me the value of human-centric relationship. So from a very early age, there was this classic saying, it's not what you know, Colin, it's who you know. And I feel very fortunate that sort of growing up through my teenage, adolescent years, as I said, I was very sporty, kind of installed a number of disciplines in me, which has stood me in really good stead for the whole of my life, in terms of relationships, being able to work with others, understanding that people are different, understanding the importance of a team. And it does sound very basic, but it does stem back to a lot of those things. And so I was very, very fortunate in my, as I said, adolescent, teenage years. There was property around me in all different directions. My grandfather, my dad's brother, there was a lot of property in the blood. as it were. And so when it came through going through my education, which wasn't, nothing in my life has been straightforward. Kind of sat my GCSEs, managed to make a real hash of those at a very good school, and they were kind of trying to figure out what had gone wrong. Managed to kind of convince them to be able to stay on and do 6 GCSE retakes that would get me the entry into my A levels, plus do 3 A levels. After 3 or 4 months of doing that, I was like, I'm just not going to get my head around this. Left, went to college, did a BTEC in business and finance because I thought it's generic and let's see where this takes me.
I have to interrupt you because that is the identical path that I took.
Okay.
In the sense that GCSEs not very good. I did just get enough to continue to do AS levels, and to say I did bad at my AS levels doesn't quite tell the full picture.
well, I didn't even get there,
and then
Steve.
went and did a BTEC in construction. And I don't know about you, and you can come on to it. But for me, it was a big change from turning up to school, being told what to do, to going to college by choice, a completely different learning experience, and one that I then thrived in.
Yeah, it felt more interactive. Mine wasn't in the construction real estate industry. It was BTEC in business and finance, which I just kind of enjoyed the fact that I could, to some extent, work at my own pace with regards to it was far more coursework based, etc., etc. But don't ask me how I managed to excel and get myself onto a Bachelor of Science honours degree in estate management at Westminster University, Marylebone Road campus. And the rest is kind of history. I did that. I got onto that. I think it was 92, graduated the summer of 95.
In terms of picking that course, was that kind of always in your mind? So you're doing your A-levels because you knew you wanted to go to uni, because you knew you wanted to do, that particular...
Yeah, again, my parents were smart. So when I was in my latter teens, it was never a case of, well, you've got 6, we've got these ridiculously long holidays. It's like, go and just like sleep all day and whatever, they were smart. They were kind of right. Enjoy yourself. You're young. You're never going to get these years out. But at the same time, let's think about where your career path is going. And so they sat down and, through contacts of my parents, it was a case of, well, go and do. I remember working in a sports shop. I remember working in retail. I remember working for an industrial agent, measuring sheds. I remember doing investment property in central London. So I by the time I'd kind of reached uni, I knew 2 things. I had a great social life in my teenage years. So I never felt the need to go to uni to have that social experience. My parents gave me a lot of independence within a framework, but a lot of independence. They all encouraged me to be very independent. And so there was never the desire, wow, I've got to go to uni, let my hair down and experience this crazy social life, because I had the most incredible social life down in London. And I knew I wanted to get into property. I thought, well, what's the point in going up to Manchester, Leeds, not wherever, and studying when I know, as much as I knew when I was 19 or 20, whatever it was, that I wanted to be in central London property. So why not study there? And
Sure.
All the work that I was going to do around that course could have a basis to where I wanted to be and where I wanted my career to go. So it just seemed the most natural place for me to go and study. And I did that. I graduated in the summer of 95. One postgraduate had a job. I must have written 150 letters at the time. We're talking the summer of 95. So you haven't got the expansive amount of information and access to tools that you do today in terms of jobs. Go back to that good old kind of, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I don't know if I've mentioned, but I was a qualified LTA tennis coach back in the day.
You haven't. We can touch on that.
You can touch on that. It was useful with a name like Becker, but comparisons made with Boris and his success back in the 90s, I think it was now, and there was actually an article of me in one of the national press being the next British hope and whatnot, but it's another story for another day. But through someone that I was coaching, they said to me, there's this company who are looking for someone to kind of do a bit of work experience. And I thought, okay, great. I was coaching, I was living at home. So I went and met the guy seemed so disinterested in what I had to say. It was just like, we're literally looking for someone to lug some boxes and, just do some dirty work for a couple of weeks. And I said, look, when can I start? And the bottom line is I was first in, last out. Came to December of that year and everyone sort of said, we really like you, Cole, but we can't afford to take you on. It was a tough period, your choice. And I was like, well, I'd like to stay. They thought I was mad. I rolled my sleeves up. I made myself a nuisance. I learned as much as I could. And it's a junior back in those days, but you'd call it a graduate surveyor today, left. They offered me the job in May 96. Within 2 or 3 years, I was made a salaried partner. And I think 3 or 4 years after that, I became a shareholder in the business.
And quite a fast track from what is essentially a graduate position, which probably speaks to the fact that you've been in London, for quite a long time by that point in time, including the study. What was it that you enjoyed most about that? Because you could have got a job at any agency. I know that was one that came on the table, but what particularly did you enjoy about those early
It's funny
years?
And possibly topical at the moment, Steve, in the sense that, I look around me and people chasing salaries. I get it, because London isn't a cheap place to live, or if you're young, enjoy yourself. It's an expensive city to live in.
It's expensive hobby, enjoying yourself in London, yeah.
Correct. Very much so. But for me, it was never about chasing titles. Although they came to me quickly, I wasn't interested in that. I wasn't interested in titles. It was about cementing myself within an organization where I felt I fitted and could make a difference.
How big an organisation was Metrus back in sort of 95,
very,
96?
very different organisation. I mean, we're at 67 staff, I think, now. Back then, we were about 6 or 7 staff.
Oh, I see. So it really was, a small niche agency at that point in time. So
Absolutely.
Quite, in terms of career progression, quite easy for you to shine amongst a small amount of people.
It's always been multidisciplined. So we've always carried various service lines, be it management, commercial, residential, professional, landlord, tenant, lease advisory, agency, investment. There's always been those service lines, but they've expanded tremendously, to today, where we now have over £6 billion worth of assets under management and collect in excess of 300 million a year in rent. So the business has grown exponentially over the years. But it felt, and this isn't being disrespectful to our market leaders and the global organizations within our industry. I didn't want to be a number. I wanted to be a name. And I always felt the exposure that I would, within a smaller organization, a niche agency, there was no value to, and I think the difference I've encountered over the years, having conversations with my contemporaries within our industry that have been in larger organizations, is there's a real kind of protection over clients. And whilst I'm of course protective over my clients, those that come and work with me in particular, I'm very much embracing them as part of the team. It's not, they're never going to sit in a meeting with my client because I'm worried about, I trust my ability and my relationship with the client, that the client knows the relationships with Colin. And therefore, if I introduce Steve as a member of my team, it's not a threat to me. It was always about being at the right place.
Salaried partner in...
I think it was I joined in 95, was offered the job in 96. I think it was the late 90s, 98, 98-ish.
And what part of the business were you focused on at that point in time?
I've always focused on the agency, lease advisory, capital markets, that's always been my area of expertise.
And what do you think the business and the other shareholders in the business saw in you at that point in time? Because that was a fast track. Were you working harder than everybody else? Did you have visions for the business that excited them and they wanted you to be a part of?
What did they see in me? I think they saw someone that was, I'll come up with all the cliches here: humble, hardworking, honest, loyal, dedicated, had leadership qualities.
That are at the start of their career, that do have ambitions of, wanting to be a salary partner or an equity partner in the business that they're in. And I would say, bear those ambitions with due care and consideration, because It sounds great. Everybody wants to be an equity partner in a business, but that isn't necessarily the right path for everybody. But it would be useful for them to have an understanding of the things that they should be focusing on to make that happen, if that makes sense.
The best way to answer that question is all of us have different qualities, Steve. And often I think, and people have different opinions on this, by the way. My take on leadership, because ultimately, if you want to own a business, there's a large element of responsibility. Not everyone wants that responsibility, as you alluded to. For me personally, nothing gives me greater pleasure in life than feeling that I've had an impact on someone's life, but meaningful impact on their life, and B, you've empowered them to become a better person and an individual. And everyone has different leadership styles. My personal take is that effective, because I don't like the word good or bad, right? There's no good, but effective leadership is about flexibility and understanding people. And each of us, as I said earlier, have different qualities. I really genuinely believe one of my biggest qualities is that I understand people. I get. And therefore, if you understand people, you understand that people are very, very different. What makes Steve tick is very different to what makes Colin or David or Peter or Joan or Mia or Hazel. Everyone ticks differently, okay? And therefore, I believe if you put yourself in a position where you're going to take responsibility, you have to understand that you have to look at everyone differently. And you yourself have to be flexible. You have to have the tools to know how to deal with those individual personalities, those individual qualities that people possess, and try as best you can to do what I said earlier, which is empower them to feel that they really can make a difference. You can teach someone capital values, rental values. You can teach them about real estate, the fundamentals of. What you can't teach is someone to sit down with another human being with nothing there. It's just raw individuals and someone saying, I like this individual. I want to engage with this individual. I want to do business with this individual because fundamentally I enjoy their company. The fact that the bricks and mortar, I always say, Steve, are a byproduct of what I do. And I go on to this. I say, great doctors treat people, and the best teachers, you'll remember the teacher that taught Steve as a person, not a pupil. Why? Because he got you. He knew what made you tick, or she knew what made you tick. Okay. And I think that's fundamental to who I am and what I do. And that's been my biggest driver in working with my, fellow partners and building this business is I like to think that we understand what we do. Ultimately, our clients it's about people.
I think that you can take that into any industry. The expert advice that you give is expert advice. A quick 15-second pause in today's content to tell you about the amazing work we do at Fidgins. We're a small but powerful team of cost consultants based on Oxford Street and focused on the London commercial sector. We help project managers and end users successfully deliver a vision for their projects. For our smaller schemes, 10,000 square foot and upwards, we offer a neat one-stop solution covering PM, CM and EA roles, which is particularly well suited for fast-paced, budget-constrained projects. We also work with a range of brilliant project managers on larger office fit-outs where we solely provide cost management services. These currently include 2 exciting large occupier schemes, both with build costs in excess of 20 million. Whether you're an end user, an asset manager or a project manager, our only rule is that you're nice to work with because life's too short to not enjoy your day job. So if you want to find out how we do things differently, send me a message on LinkedIn and we can have a chat. Now, back to the show. But is it more or less expert than your competitors? The difference is it's how you package that up. And it's about the communication skills and the people skills and the humility and the empathy that sits behind that advice. Same for us. We're a very good cost management firm. Are we better than our competitors? Probably not. We're on par. But I think what we do differently and where I think we do stand head and shoulders above others is that it's really a people business first. It's about understanding what clients want, that not what necessarily what they want from just a project, but what do they want for their business? What do they want personally as an individual? What do they stand to gain or lose if this project doesn't succeed? And understanding that enables us to give our advice, I think, in a very unique way.
And the other piece of advice but we both, I share the same challenge as you, as patience. We live in a world where you want something to eat, 2 clicks, you've got it. You need somewhere to stay, 2 clicks, it's there. Everything is 3,000 miles an hour. Just if people understand that everything we've just spoken about in terms of relationships and building those relationships and leadership and understanding people takes time, trust, in order to I always say vulnerability in the wrong hands is very dangerous, but in the right hands, it's a great thing. If your clients really trust you to the point that they're sitting with you these assets, and sometimes, we're talking significant numbers here, Steve, but they are, I don't know if vulnerable is the right, but I'm going to use it. If they feel vulnerable to you as their advisor, that, I trust this guy implicitly, right? Now, of course, 30 years, I'd like to think I've built up significant experience, knowledge, and the advice that I give is incredibly intelligent. We'll always try and look at ways. No one wants to hear of problems. I always say, let's bring solutions. I can sit in front of you and bring a plethora of problems. You're just stating the obvious. Let's find solutions. But that takes time, Steve. And you've got to be prepared to put the work in. And that's my kind of biggest message to those starting their careers out there today is there's that, I want to be here by the time I'm 25 and 30. It will come. If you're as good as you think you are, it will come. But be patient, be true to yourself, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, I think, and I'm guilty, as you said, very guilty of being impatient. And I think that speaks a lot of the people coming through, through the ranks nowadays. So 29 years at Metrus.
Correct.
Which is a long time, but it's a very long time for, in comparison to kind of the modern state of the employment sector in London currently. I think it would be really nice to kind of touch on briefly over those 29 years and kind of how your role has evolved along that timeline. Has it obviously from graduate to salary partner to equity partner, and then equity partner for the balance? Your roles within that period as an equity partner, what you've been focusing on, how you think you might have changed over that time frame?
Fundamentally, the focus has always been central London offices. From a very early point in my career, I came into a great team with some great people, learned a tremendous amount from them. It's always been a small team because of the practice. And when I say small, I think at its maximum we were 8 in our team. There's now 5. So it's tended to fluctuate. If I was asked, it was probably about 6 of us at any one given time over those 29 years. But primarily, it's been about building the agency team within the practice. There've been a number of clients that have grown with us over the 29 years. What I will do is take you back when I first joined in September 95, focusing on central London, effectively landlord and tenant rep work. Then in 96, one of the founding partners of Metrus joined a public property company called Compco Holdings, which was run by the Nadler family. Nigel Ross and Andrew Jay, who were the 2 founding partners of Metrus. Nigel went across to run Compco, and Andrew, on an operational basis, effectively stayed with Metrus. And through that relationship, we were introduced to Mark Shipman at Michael Elliott, who is one of the founders of Michael Elliott, a boutique investment agency that have always done investment work of the highest caliber, best in class. In the early 2000s, a joint venture company was formed between Metrus and Michael Elliott, whereby effectively we sat down, and Mark was prolific and always has been with his partners in acquiring significant assets for significant clients, basically. And we just sat down and said, well, okay, but what's happening with the management, the leasing, the professional work? And so a joint venture company was formed to effectively facilitate those clients were purchasing through Mark and were then able to, if they wanted to, it was purely a choice of the client, but they were then able to say, okay, yeah, we're happy to, we've bought the asset, we're happy for Met to deal with the periphery services. It's not always the case. What happened was that joint venture company grew and grew and grew to the point that it made sense to kind of merge the two. So probably going back 15 plus years, the joint venture company and Metrus existed under a different banner, but they basically merged, with 50% of Metrus being owned by Mark and his partner Dominic, and the remaining 50% owned by myself and a few other equity partners at Metrus. And that really changed the dynamic of the business. We were growing at the time anyway, but what it enabled us to do was have exposure to, real big deals and trophy assets. And like I alluded to before, to where we stand today, where we've got 6 billion under management and collect in excess of 300 million a year. But that's really a combination of the partnership with Mark and Dominic and the blood, sweat, tears and incredible amount of hard work that myself and my other partners have put in to build the practice to what it is today. And we don't stand still. We continue to strive forward. And I think one of the biggest drivers for me personally, and I think my other partners, if I may speak on their behalf, of late, is we've almost been victims of our own success. And when we've met people and said, "This is what we do," they go, "Wow, I thought that you were like a dozen guys just doing some management. I had no idea the extent of the business that you've built and that you run." And so over the last few years, we've really put a push together to kind of shout about what we do and go out there and sort of not be shy to say, this is who we are. This is how we do it, and we're proud to say so. And we are one of London's leading independent advisors, and I think that word independent is key because we've always felt value in being independent. In terms of my area of expertise, we've never pigeonholed ourselves to a particular submarket. I've always felt value in being able to go and see a 40,000 square foot building in Victoria, or as a 45,000 square foot building in SE1, or 30,000 square feet in Fitzrovia, and saying, I'm really not conflicted because I've got 65 other instructions in this area, and therefore I can just tell you as I see it and genuinely give you the best advice possible. And so I think that's really, without going year on year.
It's a very useful insight. I think so. On a daily basis now, in terms of sort of your involvement in the business, are you involved sort of deal by deal, transaction by transaction?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you say to me what drives me, it's the deal and the people.
So you're not sitting in an office?
Absolutely not. I go stir crazy, Steve. I'm in an open plan office. I'm involved in everything, not from a controlling point of view, from a view that I just really do love being involved, no matter how big or small. Because as I said, if you're true to your word and you really want to empower people, there's a saying that a very dear friend of mine once said to me, "Do as I do, not what I say."
I think I say differently to my children.
No, but it's true. People quickly suss you out. So at the end of the day, I think, when people see you're rolling your sleeves up and you're involved in every transaction, it makes a big difference. And, I love it. I thoroughly enjoy every aspect of the deal, from its inception, from meeting a client, be it existing or new, to when that deal has completed. And I'm pleased to say, when I look back over the years, we've won a lot more than we've ever lost. Through years of experience and expertise, you get to see warning signs sooner. But I just got to be in it. You've really got to be actively involved, not at arm's length. I think one of the key things, and it's just come to me whilst we're talking, and something that I think is very important to pass on, is the emotional side. It's very easy to say, And I think, listen, being blunt, if you're an agent, everyone will have a common denominator about the deal and getting the deal done. One of my biggest strengths is controlling emotion. I always say to people, if you bring emotion into the negotiation, you're always weaker. And you've got to be careful there, because that doesn't mean I don't care. I'm I'm emotionally detached. No, absolutely not. But if you allow your emotions to take over, it could be dangerous. Again, to coin one of my favorite sayings, anger is the wind that blows out the candle of logic.
Wow, that's one of the things I did want to touch on. And I think we started off by you saying that you were always surrounded by property at a young age, and it was kind of that was the way that you were going to go. Was that you're now no longer working as the only Becker in Metrus?
Correct. I'm very fortunate to have both my sons involved working with me. One who is office based, effectively joined in Jan 23. So he's coming up now. January will be 2 years. And my other son, who has been doing some creative work for us, dealing with some videography, because our market it's fast moving in terms of tech. And whereas 20 years ago it was about paper and deals, and you look at the information available, you were relying on the estate agents clearinghouse that came through once a week with that's where we got our information in terms of available properties and listings. And then you had your own listings, and nowadays within a matter of minutes you can prepare a report with hundreds of properties across various sectors, conventional, leasing, flex, managed, and present that to a client within, as I said, a matter of minutes. So the world of tech and real estate has changed dramatically. And my youngest son is very involved with us in terms of delivering videography as far as the assets that we lease or sell. So,
Gotcha. How are you
yeah,
finding it then? I mean,
I
I will
love
say,
it.
because I work with my dad, and I think it for a father-son relationship, it's an absolute privilege. Not many people get to spend that much time with their kids, working together. And I also think I don't think many people get to, experience. It's almost, it's a different relationship dynamic. Everyone knows what the father and son deal's like. That's fine. They don't necessarily get to kind of have a parallel relationship of working together, which comes with challenges. But I think it's healthy to have those challenges. And actually, I think that enhances the father son bond.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Steve. It is challenging, absolutely. If anything, one of my biggest challenges is kind of not the difficult thing for me, is that sometimes I could be too harsh or too critical, albeit in a constructive nature, but you want them to succeed.
Sure.
Therefore, you're putting added pressure on possibly the relationship and the work that they're doing. And therefore, I find myself often kind of reminding myself of the fact that certainly, one's 22 and one's 20. And therefore, they're very much at the infant stages of their career. And, they've got an incredible journey to go on. So, yeah, I do. And as you say, it's full of, but there's also significant rewards. So recently we had a situation whereby I received a call from a landlord client who had said they'd been recommended to speak to me, which is always a lovely call to take. Went along, met with him. They had a gorgeous self-contained building in Marylebone where they'd had a tenant in there for 15 years. The building needed to be completely redefined, remodeled. They did a superb job on executing and delivering a refurbished building. We digressed about how we offered the building, whether we offered it fitted or not, but we just felt that there could be a number of end users, and therefore he just went to the extent, as I said, of executing a superb refurbishment of the building. My youngest son went through the project in terms of videoing pre and post refurbishment, and we had carried out an inspection with a party during the refurbishment who couldn't quite grasp what it was going to look like. Very unique building, over 2 floors, terrace, Marylebone. It ticked all the boxes, very rare. And when we completed the video, literally the day that the refurbishment had been carried out, and sent it to this party, they were like, wow, it looks great. When can we get over? And cut a long story short, I think within the matter of a month, we'd completed a deal. So it was a real family affair. And I kind of sat back afterwards and thought, wow, that's so satisfying. The client was delighted. He was delighted at the advice we'd given. He was delighted that we'd secured a tenant so quickly. He was delighted that the marketing material had kind of done what it needed to do in terms of, highlighting the quality of the building, and it was great. But it is, I feel very privileged, very blessed, Steve, to have both boys working with me, and I never take it for granted. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it.
I'm sure they do too. We are kind of drawing to a close. So in terms of 2025, thoughts on next year? I think this is going to go out next week.
Well, you're really putting me on the mark here. We can reconvene this time next year and
swap notes.
Well, one of the things I say to people is write a letter this time of year of what you want to achieve in 2025 and open it in a year's time. It's been a funny world this year. What do I think of Look, we've had a new government this year. There's been a lot of uncertainty around the globe, but I'm going to take this back to another mantra that I live by, which is celebrate the wins. We very often look at our lives and too much work, too little work, too many friends, too many this, too hot, too windy, too cold. I genuinely believe I take wonder in the world in which we live. I embrace the industry. I think the real estate world is a phenomenal world. I encourage it next year to, as I'm sure it will do, move forward. I think London is incredibly resilient. It sits perfectly geographically between East and West. We have a trusted financial system, dare I say it, trusted advisors. I see no reason why the market shouldn't go from strength to strength. There will be challenges, but I think I look forward to next year. We've got some exciting things ahead that we're working on as a business. And yeah, I hope that all your listeners and yourself included have a wonderful Christmas, New Year, happy, healthy, prosperous, filled with fun. You've got to enjoy yourself. Yeah, that would be my message.
I think that's a lovely way to end the episode. Colin, I've really enjoyed today.
Likewise, Steve.
We'll get something in the diary early next year, and then we'll definitely get you back on. But look, have a fab Christmas. Keep in touch.
You too. It's been great speaking to you, Steve. Really, really has.
Take care.
Thank you again.
This podcast is sponsored by Fidgins, a London-based cost consultancy. Please visit fidgins.co.uk to find out more about our market-leading service and some of the amazing clients we get to work with. We're super open to guest recommendations for this podcast, so if there's anyone in the industry you'd like to get on the show, please visit the website or send me a message on LinkedIn and I'll try to make it happen. Thanks and bye for now.